What is up, everybody? Welcome to the All NBA show, part of the All City podcast presented by DraftKings. All NBA is sponsored by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. I am obviously not Adam Mares. I am Gerald Bourguet, filling in as guest host today. And with me, as always, is the esteemed Tim Legler. Legs, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Just ready to talk about what I felt like was one of the signature performances of Luka Doncic's career. Had a lot of help. We'll get into that too. Kyrie was incredible, but I just feel like this was all about Luka and his presence in the start of this game and refusing, Gerald, to allow too much anxiety creep into this situation for the Mavericks, because a lot of it would have been there if they got into a second half of a one-possession game, knowing that, they have one more game left at home in this series if they don't close it out last night. And I just thought Luka Doncic was at his absolute best in the first quarter of that game, and the tone that it set gave his team a lot of confidence that they were then able to turn into a pretty big lead.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into that because Luka is the story of the day after that performance. Mavs closing it out in Game 5 on the road with a 124-103 win over Minnesota. Luka finished with 36, 10, and 5. I think he had 20 of their first 30 points and outscored the Timberwolves in the first quarter. So like you said, came out, set the tone immediately. And I'm not going to lie to you, Tim, as someone who's been covering the Suns, there were a lot of PTSD flashbacks during that game in terms of a guy going into an opponent's building and absolutely ripping their heart outs with, outscoring an opponent in the first quarter by himself. I feel like we've seen it before, but you're right. This was somehow yet another signature kind of gem in his belt in terms of what he's been able to do in these playoffs. And it's against the number one defense in the league. Like, we saw what they were able to do against certain guys, especially in the first round, the way that they limited guys like Devin Booker, even Kevin Durant. You go into this game and they just had no answer for Luka. I'm curious, what do you do with a guy like that, and what makes him so unguardable when you look at what he was able to do against the number one defense in the league?
Yeah, look, I think, we got to put this in perspective, what we watched last night, because you're talking about a defense that made a team in Denver at times in that series like a championship offense with an MVP, a three-time MVP, with an offense that I felt like was the best half-court executing offense in the NBA, and they made them look completely futile at times. That's how suffocating Minnesota's defense could be. So you come into this game, and it was clear from the beginning. And look, Luka every night, I always feel like the line I use is he dips his toe in the water for himself as a scorer. He's different in that way. There's a lot of great scorers in this league that will come out and feel their way the first 5 or 6 minutes, get a couple touches. Of course, they'll get a shot or two up, but they're not intent on like getting themselves going. Luka feel like plays that way every night. Like, he's going to always come out and kind of throw a couple things out there, right? And see how he's feeling. And I just felt like this was a show of the best offensive player in the NBA, which I believe he is, with this incredible laser focus and precision and concentration that he's able to summon when he needs it. Because I don't know that I've ever seen Luka look that pure as a shooter than he did in the first quarter of that game. And what I mean by that is the way the ball was coming off, like the rotation was perfect. The arc was perfect. Everything was on balance. Like, it was so strong going toward the rim. Sometimes Luka, it can be a little inconsistent with that jump shot. And he just came out firing these lasers at them with any kind of space. And it's the one thing, if you're Minnesota, like, you cannot deal with Luka making those perimeter shots. You can try to load up on him ball screens, you can send extra bodies on penetration and try to take away some of his ability to get to the rim or the line. And even then, he'll probably still throw some lobs and hurt your kickouts or shoot a little lean back mid range. But you can at least like sort of have a game plan to throw extra bodies there. When he's just coming down and taking catch and shoot 28 footers or taking, getting one ball screen at 30 feet and taking one more dribble and just pulling up before the second line defender can get there, there's nothing you can do about it except hope that this is temporary and he's going to cool off. And even if he hits you with 2 or 3, he's not going to hit you with a whole bunch of them in one short period of time. That's exactly what he did. He felt great with his J early. And so he was like, I'm just going to keep on firing these things up there and see where this can go. And it led to that. One of the best quarters of his career, one of the most significant quarters of his career, maybe the most, if you look at the fact that they're now in the NBA Finals, his first Finals appearance as a result of the lead that they got early and the tone that he set for his team and the message he sent to Minnesota's defense. Like, there's nothing you have for me that's going to affect me. And I think that may be arguably the best quarter Luka Doncic has ever played because of what was at stake.
Yeah, I mean, the step back three, it's something we've talked about with Luka for a few years now. When that thing is on, it elevates him to just truly unguardable levels. And I feel like you can say that about a number of superstars, like, oh, when they're hitting threes, you can't stop them. But with him in particular, it's more effective, I guess, because he can get that step back off at any point in time. Like the release that he has and the fact that he does it, it's not the quickest step back. It's not based in athleticism. It's just a fluid motion that you just don't have an answer for. When that shot is falling, it truly makes him unguardable. I did want to get your thought on this because I saw someone tweet about how Luka was arguably the best pick and roll player since LeBron James and is cementing his case as one of the best pick and roll players ever. Do you feel that when you watch Luka? Because just watching him navigate those screens, like you said, the ability to get whatever he wants in the mid-range, but also to leave the help defender or the low man in kind of this no man's land where if they move to Luka, he's going to find the lob. And if they don't come to him, he's going to get his shot. It just felt like even Minnesota's defense didn't have an answer for that either.
Didn't. Look, I'm going to take you back to something. And I wish maybe I should have thought about pulling the audio from this because I was on the air the night Luka Doncic made his NBA debut. Mm-hmm. And I believe they're playing the Phoenix Suns, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And in the first 6 minutes of that game, and to that point, all I had seen of Luka was like everybody else, like kind of like film and evaluating him. Fran Fraschilla, who I trust more than anybody else at ESPN in evaluating foreign talent, was telling me that this guy, like 15, 16 years old, he was telling me about Luka Doncic. So I knew about it. By the time, obviously, he got to the point where he was selected, everybody kind of knew about him. And so I'm watching this game that night. And in the first 6 minutes of the game, off 3 different ball screens, Luka Doncic, in this pin, he hadn't even like taken a shot. He threw a ridiculous pocket pass for a layup off of action, off ball screen, getting down the lane. He threw a lob dunk, and he came down like the right slot and threw a laser to the left corner to hit a shooter right in the pocket for a 3-point shot. And right then I said, the league is in trouble. The league is in trouble if he's processing these situations with his passing. Now at this point, his scoring hadn't taken off the way that it has here the last few years. But just in looking at what he was seeing, the speed with which he was playing, and the fact that he was able to slow himself down when everybody else was speeding up and what he's able to see and read, and then you add in the size and the strength factor to be able to get the ball anywhere on the court, because I think it's a big part of it. That's why LeBron is in a special category. It's one thing to know what's open. It's a whole nother thing to have the physical dimensions to get it there, which means size, vision, and then the strength to put that thing on a rope so it gets there like a half count faster than the defense is able to rotate. So I saw that early on, and I was like, this guy has complete mastery of like ball screen basketball. He totally understands and anticipates what you're about to do defensively. He knows already. He's seeing it at a different speed. Everything is slower for this guy, and the league is in trouble. And I literally said that night. And obviously, look what he's going on to become. It is not an overstatement to say
Yeah.
this is one of the best ball screen players this league has ever seen. There's no refuting it. To me, if you debate that or if you take the opposite approach on that, it's just because you don't like Luka Doncic. Whatever. Have at it if you want to. We both know that exists in media and that exists in people that aren't even in media that just, that follow shows and comment and they love basketball and they want to get involved in the conversation. Like we have people in the chat right now. If you don't believe that and think that's irrefutable, that this is one of the best ball screen offensive players this league's ever seen, then you just don't like Luka. Just admit that. I'm okay with it. Just say it. You know what? He is, but I can't stand him anyway. And here's why. Like, if that's how you feel, go ahead. But you can't, on the basis of merit, watch the guy play and not agree with that. And look, I'm just talking about his passing early on. When you add in his ability to shoot step back shots, to take a guy and get him on his back, and I always say like carries guys like a backpack. Like he just holds you in that spot. He holds you there. Like you can't get around him because he's too wide. He's too strong. He uses his off arm well. And then what he does is he'll like release you to allow you then to like try to sprint around in front at the exact time he's planting his leg and stepping away from you. So your momentum is going toward the rim. Once he finally lets you out of jail, you're able to now try to get in front of him at the exact time he knows what he's doing. He's then going to step and reverse direction. There's no possible way you can retreat, stop, recover, get up, and contest it. He hit a few of those last night too. And then, of course, the lob threat, but you got to give the personnel for him to do that. And now they've added 2 of those guys. So you add it all up, there's no question. This guy controls the offensive end of the floor in this league like nobody else, Gerald. I don't think there's anybody in his league right now in terms of controlling the action because it's a ball screen league and it's a dribble handoff league. That's what this league is, and that's where he excels.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what Luka's able to do in his first finals, especially against what you would argue is their toughest challenge yet against the Boston Celtics. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But like you mentioned earlier, it was all about Luka, but it wasn't just Luka, obviously, that got them to this point because we've seen Luka do what he's been doing individually. But this Dallas Mavericks team, Mavs people have been telling us for weeks and months, and you especially have been on top of this, that this Mavs team is special, that they could be a threat to win the West. And here we are now. I'm curious what else has jumped out to you. For me, like, to go back to Luka for 1 second, the defense that we've seen from him and from Kyrie has been elevated to a level that I truthfully was not expecting. And that's been the case for months now. If you look at since around the start of February, I think the Mavs are 6th in defensive rating. It feels like they've been executing at a really high level on that end of the floor. They've got role players and PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, the new arrivals that have stepped up. They've got Derek Jones Jr. shooting at a 40% clip from 3. It feels like they're getting contributions across the board from where they need. What is it about this Mavs team when you look beyond Luka that stands out to you?
Yeah, look, I just think that they've got all the pieces fit. They're able to stay in their lane because they have this maestro orchestrating the offense, right? And he's dictating possessions. And then they added, obviously, this elite level, one of the best offensive talents of his generation in Kyrie Irving, who's going to be able to give a lot of room to go operate and put so much pressure on defenses as well. So you got the secondary scorer next to him, which you need. Every team needs. And then these other pieces, like what they're asked to do, is very simple. It's not like a complicated, it's not a complicated detail about what their job requires. Pretty simple offensively, what you are asked to do. For the most part, some of these guys are asked to spot up, knock down 3-point shots at a high rate. Some guys are asked to time up their slashes and lobs, and they do it every time. And all Luka and Jason Kidd want are do it hard every time. Because if you create the threat every time, and I have a lot of respect for guys that'll screen dive 15 times, knowing they're going to get rewarded 2 or 3. That takes a lot of sacrifice on your part, a lot of energy to keep doing it because it's in the best interest of the team because you've got to get the defense to be occupied with that, even if you're not getting it for whatever reason. So they've got the rim runners. They've got a great weak side slasher in Derek Jones, who also, by the way, now is making some timely 3-point shots, which is like a bonus for him. But now I think I'm expecting him to make 2 or 3 of those a game. PJ Washington, same thing. He's a really good weak side slasher, but he's elevated their catch and shoot 3-point situation dramatically. And you're not sacrificing anything defensively with the guys you brought in because they compete, Gafford and Washington at the top of the list. So I just think the pieces fit really well. around the leader of their offense and how he wants to play. And they've surrounded him with the guys that do a job. They're happy doing their job. And they know ultimately doing a specific job on a team that's playing for a championship is going to be more highly regarded and respected league-wide and people that follow the NBA than someone that you don't know exactly what his job description is, does a little bit of everything at an okay level, and they're playing on some team that won 34 games. And these guys have been brought in to do very specific things, and they've risen to the occasion, man. So this is a very balanced team now. And the defensive component of it is what makes this possible. This wouldn't be possible if this team was just outscoring you. It just wouldn't be. The fact that they've got a championship level defense with athletes and activity. And can I give you one last thought on this? The theory about Luka and Kyrie, you brought it up to start the question about them buying into defense. Here's what I think went on with them. When you only had a couple of guys that fit that category, mainly Lively and Jones, right? If you're Luka and Kyrie, you're thinking like, well, we're not good enough defensively, really. Where mine extra contribution really matters that much. So we're going to go ahead and beat you because we're so great offensively on the nights that we beat you. Well, when you went out and you added Gafford and you added PJ Washington, it's now like so many places with which you're getting this kind of effort and athletic ability that now Luka and Kyrie kind of look at each other and look in the mirror and they go, well, if we're not good defensively now, we're the weak link. And people are looking at us, right, as the reason why. And I really believe the acquisition of those two guys, which gave them more depth defensively so they could be a legitimately good defensive team, now it put pressure on Kyrie and Luka to buy in, because otherwise it's going to be glaring on film. It's going to be glaring on film if you didn't rotate, glaring on film if you didn't step in on a drive, if you didn't sprint back in transition, if you didn't run from one side of the floor to the other to close out on a three-point shooter, because that's your rotation. If you're not doing that on film and you have 3 or 4 other guys doing it on the court, you stand out like a sore thumb. And now you've got nowhere to go. And now guys start to look at you differently as a leader. I really believe it. I think the pressure of the roster additions and how good they could be defensively is what brought this out of Luka and Kyrie. And now they're doing it, and they're actually like, this is kind of fun, kind of enjoyable to like have a contribution and impact on that end of the floor. And when you add it all up, this is what you have.
Yeah, it felt, you could feel that sense of like, oh, this is fun from Luka. The couple of times he dove on a loose ball and it really fired up the crowd. And it was like, we don't normally see that from Luka. And when it comes from one of your leaders, it means a lot more. I think that's a good theory you have in terms of what kind of sparked that sort of turnaround for them. But also, I got to give credit to the Dallas front office for their team building approach here, because heading into the season, I was dead wrong about this. And I know I wasn't alone in this. I thought the Mavs were closer to implosion this upcoming season than NBA Finals appearance. It felt like when they re-signed Kyrie and what they had around them, you know, this was a team that was just ducking out of the play-in not too long ago, and now they're in the finals. And you never know how a rookie is going to come in and impact things, but they nailed it with the Lively pick. And then at the deadline, they're able to go out, add more lob threats, add more rim running guys, add more slashers and defenders to this roster, and it's all coalesced and come together. And now you're looking at the end result. And to be able to do that over the course of a year, when just, you know, less than a year ago, the narrative was, oh man, these guys could be in trouble here. That's quite a turnaround. I was dead wrong on the Mavs. I think a lot of people were. And I'm not going to, you know, sit here and play revisionist history, act like, you know, we should have seen this coming from Kyrie. The guy was kind of a head case for a couple of years there. But what he's been doing here in Dallas from a playing perspective, night and day compared to that.
Gerald, I'm going to tell you right now, you weren't wrong. You weren't wrong. I felt the same way. We weren't wrong because of what happened last year. The fit was iffy at best. They did not figure it out last year. And look, they missed time. They didn't play a ton together after they acquired Kyrie. Like that matters. But it didn't look to me in watching them last year that Kyrie and Luka had any personal connection. And that's like a problem. You don't have to be best friends, but you have to look at least like you kind of respect and like each other. And so that you can continue to build your relationship on the court. And they just look kind of like two guys that were like kind of aloof in their own worlds. And on top of it, you're trying to incorporate a high volume ball handler scorer alongside of like the most dominant ball handler scorer and usage guy in the league. And you're trying to pair Kyrie next to him. That's going to take time. It's going to take a total buy-in. It's going to take Kyrie buying into the role and accepting, which I think is a perfect role for him because it's very similar to playing alongside LeBron when he had great success. But it's also going to take Luka buying in to what that's going to look like. And it didn't happen last year. And they went into the offseason. I mean, if they flamed out terribly at the end of the year, I was with you, and everybody that thought that wasn't wrong. That's what it looked like. Like anybody that could have gone into the summer last year and said, oh, this is really coming together, man. I cannot wait to see what happens in year 2. You're just lying. You're being disingenuous because you couldn't have thought it based on what you saw. I had major doubts. I was skeptical. It started to look a little better at the start of the year, but not like this. And I think the change came when they made those acquisitions and they brought in 2 guys that play so hard. They're athletic, so they prove you defensively. They accept their roles, and they're more consistent in their production in those roles than what they had. It's not even like, oh, they play hard and they accept their role, but then some nights they don't do anything for you as far as production. That wasn't the case. P.J. Washington is a more consistent shooter than Grant Williams. He's a longer, more athletic, quicker defender. Gafford gave you basically a second version of Lively. So now you have 48 minutes of that type of player on the floor. They didn't have that before. It was a drop-off. And look, Kleber's important, and he gives you a different look. He can pick and pop. He spreads the floor. Like, that's a different look than what these 2 guys do. But I think the fact that you rounded out the roster, it sent a message to Kyrie and Luka that we know what we're doing, and these pieces are going to fit well with this team. And you could just see the momentum building. And I've said it, look, they were so good to me at the end of the year defensively and the way Luka was playing. I said, if you gave him another 15 games, I think he would have run down Jokic for MVP. That's where they just ran out of time. The win gap between Denver, Oklahoma City, and Dallas was too significant to ignore when there's 2 other really good candidates. So Jokic got the MVP. And I don't have a problem with that, by the way, at all. I just think that Luka was playing so well and the team was playing so well and looking like such a threat to me. If you gave them another 15 games and they went like 12-3 to finish the year in those 15 games with Luka doing what he's doing every night, I think it would have been very difficult not to vote for him. And that's so that led us into, Gerald, the playoffs. Here are the playoffs, and they were hitting their peak, and now Luka was banged up. So they survived kind of those first 2 rounds with Luka looking the way that he did. And now he looks right again. And this is what he's capable of when he feels totally healthy and he's got a team, the best team he's had, best opportunity he's had to win a title. This is what you get. You get a team now playing for a championship.
Yeah, a remarkable one-year turnaround, hopefully giving a lot of people here in Phoenix hope that there's something on the horizon, potential turnaround for this Suns team. But Tim, I want to play some rank and file with you here because, as is always, NBA Twitter can be the best, it can be the worst, but last night it was kind of the best in some of the tweets that we have, and I think that Emma has a couple of these here, so we're going to go through these and rank and file these. This was well, of course. I don't want to start with mine, Emma. That makes me look like okay. There we go. We go. So we got this from Ben Golliver here. A Target Center fan was waving a handkerchief at Luka Doncic early in the first quarter, apparently in reference to him crying for fouls. Doncic saw him and smiled, and now he keeps looking to the fan side of the court during this early 20-point flurry. Look. Timberwolves fans are great. I love you guys, but what are you doing? You can't do that to Luka Doncic. What are you thinking?
Hey, listen, I remember that sequence, and then there was a point, he got a 3-point play, and he looked over in that direction and said, "Who's crying now?" And and that's where Snoop was sitting, and Snoop was just laughing, dying, cracking up, because he's probably thinking to himself, man, this dude is a little crazy, a little bit cold, and right now we don't have an answer for him. So it was pretty funny that. But look, here's the thing: Luka likes that stuff. And I don't think he's seen anything that's going to compare with what he's going to get from the Boston fans. Like that's what's going to make that adds a whole nother layer to this that makes it fascinating. First of all, I think we are setting up an epic NBA Finals. I really believe this could be one of the best NBA Finals we have seen in recent times because the star power is there, the defenses are there, which I like. I like having like 2 good physical, athletic defenses to go at it. And I think you've got some guys that are pretty darn good in clutch time. And I think these games are going to be close. It's hard to envision either one of these teams like running away from each other. You know, Boston can hit you with barrages with their 3-point shooting, and sort of end you and separate. I just think a team like Dallas that has a player this good controlling things, they're going to prevent those big runs. Kyrie too, whoever is leading the offense at the time, it's hard. They can interrupt those runs and stop the momentum because they're just they're so good. And then the other way, the same thing. I think Boston's defense is good enough, versatile enough. They've got enough guys that they can have such switchability on some of the Kyrie and Luka stuff that, again, they can stop Luka from going on one of those runs where he just completely dominates you for an entire quarter or a half or whatever it may be. So I think both defenses are good enough that they're going to be able to control the other teams, and then they've got elite level offensive players that can stop runs, and that's going to keep these games close. I think a lot of these games will be decided in the last 5 minutes of the game, which is why I feel good about Luka Doncic and the Mavericks going in, because there's not a single guy in this league that I trust more under pressure in those spots than him.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this matchup because there's been this idea that the Celtics have kind of taken their eye off the ball a couple times in the playoffs, and I get it to a certain degree, but they're still a damn good team. And like you said, the Mavs have been executing really well in the last 5 minutes. But you did mention the Luka Doncic Snoop interaction. That was another tweet that we have on our list here, because the Who's Crying Now MFers is one of the, I mean, to have it on audio was pretty great. Emma, I think we have that one queued up as well.
With a nice message to Snoop Dogg, saying, "I'm glad you're here and you paid for those seats."
And look, he's having words with Snoop right now. Snoop appreciates.
I mean, that's elite level trash talk. Like he's really good at that.
Yeah, whether it's Luka or any player, man, in that situation, I'm all about that. I think that's hilarious. Look, there's no better feeling in the world. Obviously, I wasn't on a player of Luka Doncic's level, so I can only imagine what it feels like at his level, at the NBA level. There's nothing. What could be better than being on the road, right, with that level of vitriol being directed at you, and there's nothing that they can do to prevent you from just eviscerating them to the extent that he did in the beginning of this game. That's got to be the greatest feeling in the world, right? And you just feel like you have so much power in the moment. So go ahead, have some fun with those fans that were giving you some choice words leading up to that moment. I don't have a problem with that. I don't care who the player is. I think that's pretty hilarious.
It's what makes the league special and what makes it fun, to be honest with you. If you can dish it out, you got to be able to take it as a fan base as well. Emma, what do we have next here? All right. Yeah. So there was at one point in the game where they were down 30. Ant comes up, hits a three. The crowd's cheering. And look, this is, like I said, a lot of Suns PTSD flashbacks. There is that infamous YouTube video. The Chris Paul hits a huge three to cut the lead down to 42. That keeps resurfacing anytime something like this happens. So, of course, Ant had to get that similar Suns treatment. That's rough. It's rough when you're getting compared to Game 7 Phoenix Suns. I'm not going to lie.
Well, and Gerald, I did feel like there was a demoralization that Minnesota was feeling by probably – I would say early second quarter. Look, a lot of guys can come out and go crazy early. I mean, and you're thinking as a team, this dude is going off right now. We'll make some adjustments on him, and it's going to stop. You can survive that. Like 20-point leads in the NBA are disappear at a higher rate than they ever have because of the prevalence of the 3-point line. Excuse me, and the number of possessions. So 20-point lead, especially early, like first quarter, early second quarter. I mean, there's no need to like really start to stress and panic. But when that lead just started to grow, continually grow, but by middle of the second quarter, I did sense, I guess rightfully so, man, when you're getting it handed to you like that and you can't stop a team, I did sense like a little bit of just demoralization, the deflation as they went into halftime. And I called Game 3 of the Minnesota series when they had beaten Minnesota had beaten Denver twice in Denver. They go back home for Game 3, right? Everybody and that Game 2 performance, right, was like one of the best defensive performances we've ever seen. Now they go home. Their first home game in the series. I called that game, and the city, like was ready to explode that day. And the arena before the game, and everybody's up, and it was like a whiteout environment. Everybody's waving stuff, and it's like and they came out, and it was like tight for about half a quarter. And then Denver just started putting it on them. And that got to 30. in the third quarter, and it was like deathly quiet the entire second half. And I really felt like Luka, Jason Kidd referenced this after the game. He said Luka completely took the crowd out of the game. And it's such an important part of your energy to get you through like tight spots and help your defense dig in when you have to in a close game. That energy that you feel, the energy was gone. And it was gone because of Luka Doncic. He just totally sucked the air out of the room with shot after shot after shot. And then Kyrie in the second quarter, basically continued the barrage. And by the time you got to halftime, it was 69-40. It's a 29-point lead at halftime. And that's a lot different than being down 20, like early second quarter. Being down close to 30 at half and you haven't figured out anything yet to stop either one of these guys. No, that's kind of where Minnesota was to start the third quarter. And give Dallas credit, man. Like they took all the drama out of it. No drama tonight. I joke that, I'm a boxing fan. Sometimes, you watch a fight you're looking forward to, and those guys come out. It's like ding, ding. They come out, and they spend the first 2.5 minutes kind of feeling each other out, right? Just kind of like, there's no feeling out process. It was like ding, ding, and Mike Tyson ran across the ring and started throwing haymakers before they even had the stool out of the ring. He was throwing haymakers, trying to knock people out. That's what it felt like. It was like, wow, how do you recover from that? And that's what Luka did to them, and that's why the night was so special. And now you set up this awesome finals, man. And we got a week to talk about it. I wish it was we were starting sooner, but it gives us a lot of time to build this up.
Yeah, for sure. And you meant, like, I hate to keep comparing things to the Suns, but that opening round haymaker that you just come out and start throwing punches, I've seen it before. I felt that feeling that I could feel through the TV last night watching Minnesota's crowd experience the same thing, being down 29. For the Suns, it was 30 at half to Luka Doncic, who's just going absolutely berserk. Like, it is demoralizing, but that is not the only comparison that we're going to make with the Suns here. Emma, what do we got next? Yeah, Luka absolutely hates teams that do performative post-game workouts. Tim, I don't know if you're familiar with the winner's work mantra here in Phoenix, but it was a very popular, very funny meme that kept going around because the Suns would always post these post-game workout videos during that 64-win season. And as soon as it came out from the Timberwolves during the playoffs, I was like, "Oh no, they're in trouble now. It's all over."
Oh
for them.
Man, it's funny. Look, you're bringing a lot of correlations into this, man, and having some experience in the Phoenix market, and what they were feeling during that time is your perfect reference point for this.
Well, let me just let me show you mine now, because this is my personal reference point. Watching Luka Doncic steal another team's soul in a closeout playoff game on the road. This was a very much the first time meme from James Franco. Again, we've seen this before. I was not surprised at all. This dude just goes into other people's buildings and rips their heart out, and that's just kind of what happens. But a lot of people were also playing this, which is something that Ant played a couple of years ago during the Suns Game 7 loss.
I remember when we were playing Phoenix, they were talking so much shit, telling us we better make the playoffs. We ain't gonna make the playoffs. We out of the playoffs, but y'all, this is a disgrace, bro. Like, y'all got points in the third.
That was on his Instagram story back in Game 7 back in the day, and of course, you know that was going to come back up again. It's all good trash talk. I love Ant Edwards. I love that he's not afraid to talk trash to anybody, but you got to be willing to take it when it comes back around as well.
Yeah, and look, we haven't put a bow on their season, so this is a step forward. It's a progression. Sometimes, man, when it ends that way, you do feel like a little bit of like the goodwill that you've built up collectively is washed away a little bit, because it's not just like, oh, you lost really tough game to a better player and a better team. Like, you got smoked. You're never in a game when you're fighting for your life. So that's going to be something bitter to take into the summer. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of growth that took place with this team, particularly around their best player. And Anthony Edwards, I think he became a better leader. I think he added some refinement to his game offensively with his handle and his shooting. He showed you what he is capable of in some big moments and some big games, the way he rose to the occasion, particularly in the Denver series. Jane McDaniels is another guy I think took huge steps forward. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think that there were Naz Reid obviously had a big year for them, breakout year. They've got to kind of look at how this ended, how they compare now to the Dallas Mavericks and other teams in the West. And they got to look at the model that they have of the multiple bigs on the court at all times. And ultimately, is that going to be the way that you can go forward and defend some of these teams that have multiple elite level ball handling scorers? Like that's a real problem for teams that have bigger teams on the court. On the number of ball screens you're putting these guys in and switches, and like the ground they have to cover with these bigs to defend these guys out at the 3-point line and also recover and take away lobs and get on the glass. So I think in some ways, like this team kind of like, even though these were close games, I think they're going to look at themselves relative, not just the Mavericks, like how much better will the Thunder be a year from now? Denver's certainly not going away. They're not going anywhere. And then you're going to have other teams in the West as well. So I think a lot of growth, very disappointing end of the season, but all in all, very much a net positive year for Minnesota. And going forward and how we're going to view them next year, primarily because of what Anthony Edwards has done to his game and his leadership going in the next year. They're going to be listed as a legitimate title contender going into the season.
Absolutely. And I do want to get into where the Timberwolves might go next. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. So, Emma, look, fellas, blink if you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift yet. Yeah, that's what we thought. Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Maybe your pops has had a bush since the 70s, and that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his day. Whether it's for the boys downstairs, his beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there, Manscaped has his bases covered. Head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ALLNBA. That's code ALLNBA at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Also, we are this close to crowning an NBA champ now. And with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. With the NBA Finals coming up, there's no better time to get in on this. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code ALLNBA. That's code ALLNBA for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. One no-sweat bet per new customer. Issued as one bonus bet based on amount of initial losing bet. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/bball for eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
All right, Tim, we touched on the Timberwolves briefly. Let's dive into what they do next, because you look at their roster situation, it's about to get a lot more expensive, but they have basically most of their entire core locked down. They've got about $196 million in committed salary for next season. They've got an ownership situation where I'm not sure who is going to be owning the team at the start of next season, which could definitely impact things if you're looking at a roster that is in the luxury tax for only the second time since 2007, 2008. And they are one of three teams, along with the Nuggets and the Suns, who have three players on max salaries. But again, they have their core locked in. They have 10 guys coming back, and 7 of those 10 are 26 years or younger. So they've got a young team. They've got room to grow. I'm curious, what are you looking at from this Timberwolves team in terms of internal growth and in terms of what they need to go out and add to their roster?
I think they need to add a couple of guys that are a little bit more specialized in terms of their shooting, so that you can have different looks on the floor. Like, you know, you're not to the point where you sacrifice what you think your defensive culture may be, but at the same time, I think the guys they have now are streaky, and on given nights, Jaden McDaniels can look like a perfect 3-and-D type of player, but then he can have stretches where it's not the case, because it's not like he's a pure shooter. Now, he does a lot of other things on the court, slashes and everything else. So I'm not saying he shouldn't be a starter, but I just think there should be a way to give them other looks for teams to have to guard when you put Edwards out there with Karl-Anthony Towns or Gobert and they're running a two-man game, and the way that it's spaced out are guys that you flat out can't leave. You just can't leave them. Even if it's for just stretches in games. I think it's a weakness of their team. So I think that would be probably the place I'd go. You're right about their salary. Like as far as these guys being locked up, Gobert locked up next year has a player option for the year after. So, that's really, I don't think he's going to opt out of $46 million at that point of his career. So, right. So you got two years for him. You got 4 more years for Towns. You've got 5 more years for Anthony Edwards. You've got 5 more years for Jaden McDaniels. These are the key guys. You're in a great spot in terms of your core is in place. They're signed. Now we have to start improving the margins around the rest of our roster and our depth with guys that make us a little bit more complementary and the pieces that, like I said, can be more consistent in terms of putting pressure on defenses. And for me, that would be shooting more than anything else. Mike Conley, he's even got 2 more years on his deal, and he's at a really reasonable number for as well as he played for them this year and in the playoffs. $9 million and $10 million. That's like stealing to get Mike Conley for that rate because he's in his mid to upper 30s. That's the only reason for that. He's still a very viable, good player for them and a leader, and he organizes them. He's very important to them. So I wouldn't want to see any change there. You got guys like Monte Morris, Kyle Anderson, like they're unrestricted free agents. So I don't know what they do there. Is that one of the places I look at? Those guys have been, Kyle Anderson in particular has been an important part of their culture. He's very versatile, sort of like a jack of all trades type player. But they thought, hey, this is a guy that maybe represents one of our better guys to guard Luka, and you saw what happened when he was on him last night in the early part of that game. So I just wonder if you look at that and say that's an area where we could potentially upgrade that to a guy that's more of a flat-out pure shooter that might hit the market or somebody we could draft. So I think that for me, in looking at their team and saying, what's the obvious area of strength? Well, it's clearly not anything defensive. They've got if you want to say add another big-time scorer to go alongside the others, they got Towns. Like you can't fit all those guys together. So I think they've got enough of that with 2-star scorers. I think you've got enough. I think consistent shooting is the area I would target if I was Minnesota.
Yeah, I think I look at that, and I think I look at more scoring or creation off the bench in terms of the backup point guard spot. Because like you mentioned, like Jaden McDaniels was one that stood out to me as like, okay, if he's having one of those nights where he's got 16, 18 points or whatever, good luck with this Timberwolves team. But there were a lot of nights where it just felt like he wasn't as big of a factor on the offensive end. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was the other guy for me. Like he had a great first round against Phoenix. Denver was okay. Minutes kind of started to decline there. And then this last series, he only averaged like 15 minutes a game. He did not shoot the ball well. I think it was 29% overall and 19% from 3 for the series. So he just kind of became a non-factor. And to your point, like Kyle Anderson was a guy that looked unplayable early in the playoffs and then suddenly was kind of the only guy that wasn't getting, turned into roadkill against Luka Doncic out there. So he's a guy, I think, because they have his bird rights, because they can, sign him for a more robust amount. He's a guy I think they would probably want to bring back, but at the same time, like I said, I don't know who's going to be owning this team. And if you're re-signing him, going over the cap, signing him with his bird rights, like that's going to come with a hefty luxury tax penalty when you're already pretty deep in there. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But I wanted to ask you about this because this is the topic that's going to come up a lot. Like Karl-Anthony Towns, he's been rumored trade block for years now. He plays fantastic against Phoenix, plays really well, fantastic against Denver. And then in this series, it's kind of back to the cat that we were hoping we weren't going to see again. Really didn't shoot the ball well. A lot of dumb fouls, foul trouble limited him. I think this was from ESPN's Bobby Marks that if you're a team that's trading for Cat because of his contract, you will hard cap yourself at the first tax apron. So that makes it harder to trade him. But I'm kind of the opinion you are what you are at this point, and you kind of have to just see this thing through with Ant and Cat and the group that you currently have. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, though.
I kind of agree with that. I don't think you can overreact to the way the season ended. And the other thing is, like, people, you can't have it both ways. You can't praise that team the way that they were being praised when they beat Denver.
Right.
Right. Think about some of the superlatives that are being thrown out there when they
Mhm.
won that series. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you name it, people were saying it. And the front office giving all the credit in the world for the way they built the team too.
Mhm.
And so you can't then just one series later turn around and flip all that and go, oh, you know what? None of this works. We got to figure it out. No, they ran into a very unique player, very unique opponent in the way that they're set up, and a guy that a lot of people don't have answers for in Luka. And that's, I think, big part of what this series came down to. He got plenty of help from Kyrie, who was sensational in this series as well. But we all know it's like Luka's the one that's orchestrating everything. So I don't think you overreact to it. I think a lot of what you saw and a lot of what was said about them is true, but I think people got ahead of themselves. They just got carried away. Because it was almost like I felt like some people wanted it so badly to be this team and this player that makes that next step and now becomes the next, dynasty in the making with this young superstar that's got a lot of charisma, incredible athletic flair. Like but it's like, this shows you how hard this stuff is, how hard it is to win. And the West isn't going to be weaker next year. It's going to be stronger, significantly stronger. And look, you never know from year to year with the injuries, and they played a big part in the entire season and playoffs in particular. So you don't really know about that stuff, but your common sense would tell you that some of these teams that are still like in the midst of their prime with their guys or on the younger side, they're just going to get better. They're going to get a year more ripened themselves, and they're going to improve their rosters. That's what they do. And Oklahoma City being at the top of the list there, Minnesota will be in that category. Denver, they're not going away. They're going to retool and remake their supporting cast. And so it's going to get harder. And it just shows you everybody got a little ahead of themselves with Minnesota, I think, after the Denver series. And it's like pump the brakes. And now we see how hard this is to accomplish. You don't have to blow it up, but you've got to continue to find ways to close the gap with the other top teams.
Yeah, I've talked about this at length on our PHNX Suns podcast, but we as NBA media or fans, a lot of people are so quick to look to anoint the next player or the next team. And we do get ahead of ourselves in that. Like we saw the 89 MJ comparisons that were coming up. And then as soon as they lose, we're looking to tear them down. We build them up so quickly and then we tear them down just as quick. It drives me nuts because we could just be joining a league that has more parity, more talent than I think we've ever seen in it. It's all about matchups in the NBA now. Like in the playoffs, it's going to come down to matchups a lot of the time because you're not going to tell me that Denver wasn't a title contender team just because they lost in the second round. Like it's going to come down to matchups. And I do feel like we kind of got ahead of ourselves with the Timberwolves, but that doesn't mean that now that they've lost, something was fundamentally wrong all along. We can't just switch up like that. Any other final thoughts on the Timberwolves?
Yeah, just one other thought. I think people need to be honest about this. Luka Doncic is just a much more complete offensive player than Anthony Edwards.
Right.
And that's the truth. And Anthony Edwards is added stuff, and he's 22 years old. So I can expect him to continue to add stuff and just look at the evolution of some of the great players in this league and what they added. Look at even like a guy like LeBron James. Look at Kawhi Leonard, what he became as an offensive player as opposed to when he broke into the league, his limitations and what he added. Giannis has added stuff. That's what it takes, right? And I expect that out of Anthony Edwards. But right now, because of Luka's ability to control the game with his handle, size, shooting, and passing at the same time, all that stuff, this breakthrough moment for them, because they added the right pieces around him, it does make you think what is going to be the answer for this team going forward? Is anybody going to have the answer for him? Because I just don't know what that is short of just absolutely selling out to him to get the ball out of his hands. And when you have Kyrie on the court and that ball's coming out, you're playing 4-on-3 with Kyrie Irving on the court. Well, good luck with that because he's got all kinds of gaps to drive and space to go make plays himself. And they've got plenty of shooting and two guys in the middle that occupy because they can just catch it one step and dunk the ball. So when you want to blitz Luka out on the floor and they say that's the only way to stop him is take the ball out of his hands, easier said than done because he gets it to the next place quickly that it has to go and trust those guys to go play. And one of those guys, by the way, is a superstar offensive player. It's not like he's out there with a bunch of role players. This isn't AI back in the day with the Sixers, where if you just blitzed him the entire time, And now their second best offensive player was Aaron McKee, who was a sixth man of the year. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Kyrie Irving. It's one of the best players of his generation offensively in this league. So I'm looking at it going, man, they broke through. They're winning these close games. Like their defense has really ramped up to championship caliber. So it's not just Minnesota. It's the whole league is now looking at Luka Doncic and looking at this team and saying, man, what is going to be the answer for him going forward? And I think that's what Minnesota is going to be now gauging themselves by in the future. And what Anthony Edwards, I think, is going to dedicate himself to this summer in adding some of those final finishing pieces offensively that Luka already has, that he now has to get command of. I think that's going to be the challenge for him. And all great players do it. And I expect Anthony Edwards to do it because I think his work ethic is that good. And I think he wants it that badly.
Absolutely. And he still has so much room to grow. It was even just this season, I think one of the big things out of Minnesota was that when he was hit with double teams, he would try to force his way through those and try to kind of force his own offense instead of getting off the ball and trust that it would find him again. And he did that as the season progressed, and he did that in the series against the Suns and was an absolute unstoppable force in that series. So I think you're right in that he has so much room, so much potential to continue adding on to his game. That if you're in Minnesota, yes, this ending to your season was rough. It was brutal, and it was not what people were expecting, I think, coming off beating the Nuggets. But man, what an impressive season and what a foundation to build on moving forward when you have not just Ant, but multiple guys who still are young and still have room to add to their game. But Tim, we're going to move on to Who Won the Week, which is brought to you by the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code ALLNBA. I think we're in agreement about who won the week, or at least who won the night, but I want to get your thoughts. I've got three options here. Luka Doncic, which is the obvious one. Kyrie Irving, which I don't think I've seen a player change public opinion about them so quick from a basketball perspective in a year. And I had to throw this one in there for me. 2018 NBA draft truthers like myself who were here in Phoenix watching the Suns take DeAndre Ayton and wondering what they were possibly seeing in that pick. But who won the week for you, Tim?
You know what? Of those options, I've talked so much about Luka. I'm going to go with Kyrie on this one.
Okay.
And I think your point is great. Like perception. Nobody's ever doubted the talent. I think some of the things that have accompanied Kyrie Irving, some are out of his control. And I was on SVP last night and we did our segment, and then they had Kyrie as a guest and a talk back with Scott. And Scott asked him about kind of this exact topic and the perception and the joy looks like he's playing with, and the way that it looks like he's in a much better place than he had been the last few years. And he admitted it. And he said some of the stuff was he lost people very close to him off the court, made basketball not as much fun, didn't seem as important in the big picture of life. And he gave a very introspective, like really honest answer about all that. And I think stuff like that helps people get to know him a little bit better, understand him a little bit better. But the buy into the defense, the buy into being completely locked in on like being engaged every night, like how important this is and how badly I want to win. They're being receptive to developing this relationship with Luka Doncic. All of that stuff has led us to this point where Kyrie Irving is going back to the NBA Finals. And you think about all of this stuff that's happened and transpired with him, with KD, with LeBron, with James Harden, right? With all these guys that we talked about all these years, right? And here it is. It's Kyrie Irving now going back to the finals, man. And it's been a little bit of a break for him since he appeared on that stage. We know what he's capable of doing. Hit the biggest shot in the history of the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise and helping lead them to their only championship along with LeBron. And now he's back. And so it's come full circle for him. And he's in a similar role next to a guy that's very similar to LeBron James in a lot of ways, the way that he plays. And it's a very comfortable place for Kyrie to be in. And I think people have always respected his talent, but now I think they're respecting how badly he wants to win and the kind of competitor that he is. That is what he's proving on a nightly basis right now. And it's been awesome to watch because nobody can deny that is entertainment at its finest when you watch basketball. 2.5 hours, give me some Kyrie Irving when he's playing this hard and this locked in, because it is special. He does things nobody else can do. And so that's, for me, the winner of the week is because of what you said. No, one, the perception of him, but two, just that he's that happy and giving us this kind of entertainment when he is happy, and now he's back in the finals. So I think he's a good winner for the week.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said earlier in the show, I don't want to play revisionist history with some of the off the court stuff, the criticism that he got in the past few years, because I think that was warranted for a lot of that stuff. But there was also the perception that from a basketball perspective, he was overrated, that he wasn't engaged, that he wasn't a good teammate, that he wasn't committed to winning, that he was just a guy that kind of wanted to show up and get shots up, and that was it. And we're seeing the buy-in, we're seeing the defense, we're seeing the heart. He's doing everything that the Mavs could reasonably ask him or want him to do on this particular team. So that for me, it really has changed that perception of him that was starting to build, especially with, like you said, the different stops that he kind of worked his way out of or forced his way out of over the last few years. Now to be able to be doing this with Luka Doncic, who was a guy that coming in, there was that infamous scouting report, quote unquote, about how his teammates wouldn't like him and how he was entitled and all this stuff. And now these two are the most unlikely pairing that are going to the NBA finals together, that, like you said, it feels like they built more of a bond than what they had last year. And so for me, my winner of the week is anybody writing stories on this NBA finals, because pick a narrative. There are so many, you talk about the Celtics being this unstoppable force that should be the hands down favorite, that if they don't win, it's a failure for them. I think you look at the Mavs, they have Luka Doncic in his first NBA finals. You look at the fact that Tatum is on his quest for redemption from the last finals, that they weren't able to finish the job, despite the fact that they've been to so many conference finals. You've got Kyrie going back to Boston. You've got Porzingis going back against the Mavs. I know a lot of people, when they were looking at potential finals matchups, Dallas, Boston might not have been high up on their list. But you look at the different angles that you can cover this series from, and how these two teams are unstoppable force, immovable object. This is going to be a really fun series.
Yeah, this is going to be, I really believe it has a chance to be one of the most entertaining finals that we've seen. In my time covering ESPN, it's my 23rd year of covering the finals and covering this league. I think it could be one of the more entertaining finals we've had in all that time, because I think it's got every element you want. And the big thing is that always matters is give us close games. That's what everybody wants, man. Give us, except probably the fans of the two respective teams. They prefer to have games like last night if you're a Dallas fan. But for us that are covering it, give me some drama, man. I want to see pressure on guys with shot making late in the game, decision making. And bring out the best in both of these teams, all of these star players that are involved. So it's gonna be awesome, man. A lot of time off right now. These guys are going to be incredibly fresh. And one thing that's going to be injected into this we have not seen is Kristaps Porzingis and his impact on the Boston Celtics, because he had a great year for them. Critical component. We always talk about what these other teams have missed. And I feel like it's too often it was not said that Boston is missing Kristaps Porzingis. Right. Okay. An enormous deal for them. 20-point scorer in the regular season, one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, a spacer that's at a higher level than anything else they have. So, and by all accounts, it looks like he's going to be ready to go right from the beginning. So that's going to be really interesting to inject a guy into that stage when he hasn't played in as long as Porzingis has been out. But he's such an impactful player. That's going to be a whole nother element to this for Dallas to have to deal with. But I just can't wait to get started.
Absolutely. We've got a week without NBA hoops, but we don't have a week without hoops in general. You guys go check out some NBA action this week. A lot of great stuff going on in the W, but that's going to do it for this edition of the All NBA Show. You can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourguet. Of course, you can follow Tim Legler on Twitter at LegsESPN. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.
Y'all silly like the mayor.